Election day is getting very, very close. It's fun. And why don't we talk about the guys on the top? There are all these amendments that are coming down that you get to decide on. We'll find out how those play out in a little bit. But first, let's talk about a couple of them, including oil and gas. You know them, you love them. Dick Wadhams, Republican hack supreme. Good to see you.
Nice to be with you.
And if you're watching now, amazingly, you were able to stay awake during the show beforehand, hosted by this gentleman, Dominic Dezzutti.
You know, it's not the 8 o'clock slot that's the sleeping pill for the Denver audience. We say that for 8:30, just so you know.
Let me tell you, I mean this sincerely. It's a nice little warm-up act you guys do for me, and I really appreciate it.
26-year warm-up act. You're welcome.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of like that lounge act. And now give it up for Devil's Advocate.
It's like when Led Zeppelin opened up for Vanilla Fudge. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the big one first, which all the money, all the attention is going to 112. This thing has been in play. The polls are going in different directions. You can look at it. Let's assume it does pass. The fear is it destroys an industry in Colorado. It's going to take away 80%, 90%, 113% of all the land for oil and gas development. They're staking a lot on that. Do we believe it?
I do. I believe it will have a direct and immediate impact on Colorado's economy. I think there will be layoffs immediately. Not a lot, because existing operations won't be affected. But I think companies will start looking down the road and saying, it's time to start moving our operations elsewhere. By the end of the year, the job impact will really be felt, and local governments will start feeling the pinch with that downturn. I think, and it will affect every part of Colorado before it's over.
The part that makes me agree with you is not the polls or anything, but the scuttle I'm hearing from pollsters.
Right.
And I'm not talking polls about will it pass, will it not pass. I'm talking about pollsters who are getting business from oil and gas investment companies outside of Colorado. This investment firm in Dallas wants to know, the other guys in DC want to know, if this thing looks like it's going to pass, we are divesting of Anadarko and Noble and these other local companies now because we're going to see them just implode. And so these pollsters are making money because the guys with money need to know if this industry is going to survive. Right. What do you see?
I think if we pair it with an assumption that if 112 can pass, Democrats have the legislature. They own the state house, the state senate, and theoretically the governor.
All right, well, stop there. So you really think that if 112 passes, it also swings a couple of those,
absolutely,
Beth Hubenik's seat or Neville's seat?
Yes.
That it swings
it's a one-seat majority. All it has to do is one district. I mean, we're not talking, it doesn't need to swing a lot of seats. So if...
And are you saying that 112 is the thing that would pull that?
I don't think 112 would pull it, but I'm saying if we're assuming a universe of 112 passes, let's also assume a Democratic majority. How long they want to stay in power becomes an immediate question, because it's a statute, it's not an amendment. And they would have the power to adjust it, but they would have in the governor's seat the person who was lobbying for 2,000-foot setbacks just a couple of years ago. So how do they want to tweak with it and save an industry? Do they want to keep it and say this was the will of the people and watch thousands of jobs leave the state? That is an immediate question they will face January of 2019.
All right, so you're assuming, along with Mr. Wadhams here, that if it passes, jobs leave and the industry starts to implode.
It begins to, and at least gives a big question for the legislature to do something about it. It is a statute. They would have the power to change it. Would they have the desire to?
You fool. Let me tell you why you fool.
Not the first time.
The only time I've ever seen the legislature, tell me if I'm wrong, reverse what the people have said in the statute was on campaign finance reform. The first one passed as statutory, and the guy said, no, we don't like it this way. Right. We changed it, and then they came back and, of course, changed the Constitution. I never really thought that, but I think you're onto something, that if there's a momentum for this to pass, it's going to be 2013 all over again, where the Democrats have control of everything. I don't see Democrats, even if it's costing so much in business, saying, no, we need to save this industry. I don't see it.
I agree, because, John, what's going on in Colorado is the same thing going on nationally. The Democratic Party is swinging left. The energy and, frankly, the power in the Colorado Democratic Party, I think, is moving left. You're going to have a bunch of new legislators who are I think, further to the left than even the ones that exist today. And it's going to be hard to convince them to change it, even if the economy is failing. The new Speaker of the House will probably be Casey Becker. She actually endorsed 112. And so I don't see it would have to get really bad in 2020 for the legislature to finally deal with it. And then that could get really messy.
You know, it's funny, take a quick tangent. You talk about the new style of Democrats, a hardcore Democratic Party. I remember Romer, I remember Lamb, and while a lot of Republicans hated them, they'd be Republicans today in comparison to what's going on. I see a nod over here.
Well, I think about your guest last week in Governor Bill Owens, who wouldn't be able to get through a Republican primary this year. So I think on both sides, people that would have been considered a moderate Republican would be vilified. And I agree with your point, moderate Democrats from the bygone era of 20 years ago would also be run out of the party.
Isn't it great being an old guy?
Absolutely.
It was so good 20 years ago.
Well, but bring it back home to today, Dominic. I think Hickenlooper has been overall a decent governor. I mean, there are some things that I think were wrong in his administration.
Oh, really?
But remember,
Do you want me to go through them?
they're there. But on this particular issue, remember, he supported fracking, and he opposes this 112. And so
Well, that's because he knows the science. He was an engineer for oil and gas fracking.
Right. But no, we're going to be, if Polis is elected governor and we pass 112, we're going to be looking at the glory days of Hickenlooper, frankly, in a couple of years.
And Scotch sales just went up a little more. Some also say that some companies that have wells already out there, that they're going to buckle down and they might actually have a competitive advantage because everybody else is closing down. I think there might be some truth to that in Colorado, but this is an international market here, and so we sit on an incredible reserve of natural gas, and we won't be able to touch it.
Well, and I think about the fans 112 must have in Wyoming, in North Dakota. And they're like, come on, baby, pass this thing, because the kind of business, if you're going to expand, Wyoming is not that far geologically from what we have here in Colorado, especially with different kinds of drilling. And Colorado is already a pretty heavily regulated oil and gas state.
It is the most regulated.
Well, next to California. Yeah. But I mean, it's so. You're right. This is not the only state to invest in. There's other ways to do it, and other ways that we'll see money going elsewhere.
All right, let's draw this perfect storm out while we're going. The other one that I think is an economy killer is Amendment 73. We've seen this progressive income tax proposal before. It was Prop 103 back in 2011 when Raleigh Heath put something up like it. We killed it 2-1. I have similar hopes for this year. But the thing that scares me about 73, a progressive income tax, is it's not tied to inflation, which means everyone at some point will be bumped up into the higher brackets as inflation pushes them up in the brackets. We got rid of this problem federally back in the 80s. This was before you were born. Back in the 80s, we got to take care of that. What happens if both 112 and 73 pass?
Oh, I think that's a huge burden on the state that will complicate it. And
I don't see it.
I don't think that one passing. I actually don't think that one will pass. But if it did, on top of the 112, wow, this economy is really headed the wrong direction. By the way, you know who passed tax indexing back in the 80s?
It's Ronald Reagan.
A senator by the name of Bill Armstrong was the sponsor of that. Anyway.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that was his passion.
Really?
When he got elected to the Senate was tax indexing. And he was the sponsor of
Your
that.
mentor, just what a figure in Colorado politics. I didn't know that was his bill.
Yeah,
I always thought, well, it happened under Reagan.
No. Well, Reagan was a supporter and signed it, but it was Armstrong's passion and bill.
And that's what Colorado used to be. All right. What do you see with 73?
I think it represents what might be some overstepping. We're not going to know this until after November, after Election Day, but just because it might be a blue wave year doesn't necessarily mean it's yes on every tax increase year. And because you haven't seen a lot of mojo with this thing, you haven't seen a lot of support, I think, from other folks, might be an example of where they're overplayed a hand. And I say they, just anybody say, well, if it's blue, we can pass every tax increase. Maybe in Denver, But the entire state, not so much, especially 55% for any amendment that has that new criteria thanks to Amendment 71.
All right, let me draw this one out for you gentlemen. All right, let's assume that Democrats sweep everything here in Colorado. All right, we've got 3 branches of government, we've got an AG, everything goes Democrat. Yet, on the ballot issues where people speak, they all vote in a conservative manner. They vote for roads without taxes. They vote down the tax increase for mystery projects. They vote down oil this. They vote down, and even might even pass something like protections for takings with that's 74. You know, what does that say, particularly about the Republican Party and Republican candidates, if voters overwhelmingly vote like Republicans on the issues, but vote for Democrats as the candidates?
Well,
and
John,
by the way, I see this as a real possibility.
I do too, and I've thought a lot about that. And it will say to us, I hope it doesn't happen. I actually don't think it will happen, but if it does, which is a possibility, it will be just another example of our Republican candidates not running very effective campaigns. It comes down to that.
What does that mean?
It means that they didn't talk about the issues the way they should have. They didn't have a positive agenda. I think that is a serious lacking with a lot of our candidates right now on the Republican side, and going back years, that they fail to define an agenda up front that they can run on that will appeal to voters and not repel them. You mentioned that Bill Owens was on last week. I think every Republican candidate ought to look at the Owens campaign, because that was him. Where he developed a clear agenda. That agenda was his. That wasn't poll tested. It wasn't because of a bunch of smart political people getting in a room.
Let me take a guess. Let me see if I can remember this, because
Yeah.
right now I know
Yes.
with
Yes. 20 years
hang
ago.
on. I know with Polis, we elect him. We're going to get free health care for all,
Right.
free preschool for all,
Yes.
and faster than California fluffy energy
Yes.
for all. I remember, let me see if I remember right.
Okay.
You elect Bill Owens, I'm going to give you tax cut, we're going to cut taxes, we're going to widen I-25, we're going to fund charter schools. How close was I?
Right on. Yeah.
20 years later.
Cut taxes, reform education, and improve transportation. Those are the specifics behind
Right.
it, which he had many specifics behind those 3 points.
Right.
I see so often with our Republican candidates, John, they don't do that anymore. And that's why we lose elections, because the people want to know why you want to be in a particular office, and they want to know what the heck you're going to do.
There's also this other thing
Yeah.
that pulling a lever for an R this year
Yeah.
means pulling for the same party as Trump, and this
Right.
is not a state that supported Trump ever. So what do you see if it goes this direction?
I think, in addition to the example of Bill Owens, there's one other Republican that if Republicans failed across the board, that they didn't listen to was Cory Gardner. Cory Gardner ran he threaded that needle. If you were going to defeat Mark Udall when he did, you had to run the perfect campaign, and he did. He didn't wear a jacket. It was the blue shirt, rolled up sleeves in front of a windmill with his family. He was smiling in every single ad. Now, he needed Mark Udall to help him by running the campaign he did, but he was the likable guy to people who were like, I don't know who this one guy, but this guy was smiling. Coloradans want to like their statewide candidates.
That's a great point.
Listen, you idiot. These are Republicans we're talking about. These are not happy people. They cannot portray to be happy.
But it can be done.
They're pissed off.
It can be done. Cory Gardner's in the U.S. Senate right now because he smiled on camera. You smile on camera, it can happen.
Yeah, but I'm an independent now.
And Dominic, you're right. And remember what else Cory did? He went beyond the traditional Republican agenda, the strong national security and fiscal responsibility, which we always run on. But then he embraced renewable energy. Remember, the windmills. I mean, he kind of went beyond that. And in Owens' case, he embraced charter schools because minority kids were being failed in mediocre schools, and he talked a lot about that. And that's why 3 Democratic legislators, 2 of them Hispanic, endorsed him in that campaign. Because they both did things that kind of went beyond the Republican base.
That guy must have had one hell of a campaign manager back then. I can't remember who was.
Probably one of those fancy guys you can spend millions on from
one of those
DC.
guys
No one
that
local.
just costs and costs and costs. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.